town hall had been decorated since early morning. Soft lights hung from one side of the room to the other, and volunteers moved around carrying boxes, adjusting chairs and checking tables. It was the annual charity gathering, a warm event where people came together to support local families. Even though it wasn't a fancy occasion, everyone involved wanted it to feel special. Among the volunteers was a quiet young woman named Isla. She had been helping since sunrise, placing donation envelopes on tables and setting up the refreshment corner. She didn't speak much, but she always worked with care. Whenever she walked through the hall, she moved softly, almost like she didn't want to disturb anything around her. In the center of the hall stood a large black piano. It looked newly polished, shining under the yellow lights. Many people passing by admired it, though they didn't touch it. It was supposed to be played by a guest musician who had performed at previous events. Everyone expected a simple, pleasant background tune. Nothing grand, just something to keep the atmosphere warm. But as the final hour approached, the event organizer, Mr. Carver, received a phone call. His expression changed instantly. He pressed the phone against his ear, nodding even though the person on the other end couldn't see him. When the call ended, he looked tired, almost defeated. The musician wasn't coming. A sudden illness, something unavoidable. The hall was still half empty, but soon guests would start arriving. Music was a key part of the event, not because anyone needed a grand performance, but because silence made the room feel stiff and awkward. Everyone expected soft music. Not having it would make the evening feel incomplete. Mr. Carver walked around anxiously, trying to think of a solution. He approached two volunteers who shook their heads immediately when he asked if they could play even a little. He sighed, rubbing his forehead. He kept glancing at the piano as if staring at it long enough might magically solve his problem. While all this was happening, Isla continued her work quietly. She didn't seem aware of the problem unfolding. She was arranging chairs for the last row, humming very softly to herself, a habit she never noticed. Her humming wasn't loud enough to attract attention, but somehow, in the noise of the busy hall, Mr. Carver heard it. He turned toward her and took a step closer. He watched for a moment as she worked, noticing how her hands moved in a certain rhythm. Steady, calm, almost musical. He cleared his throat gently so he wouldn't startle her. "Isla," he said, "do you know anything about music? Even a little bit?" She paused and looked up, surprised that he was speaking to her about something unrelated to chairs or envelopes. "Music," she said softly. "Well, I've played before." His eyes lit up, hope returning to his voice. "You play the piano?" "A little," she answered, lowering her eyes. "But nothing special." He stepped closer, now fully interested. "A little is enough. We just need something simple. Just something basic to fill the silence once the guests arrive." The thought of sitting at that piano in front of people made her heart beat faster. She hesitated, her hands tightening on the back of a chair. "I don't know if I can," she said quietly. "I've never played in front of anyone here." Mr. Carver was gentle but desperate. "Please consider it. You don't have to perform anything difficult. Just a few easy notes. No one will expect anything big." She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes drifted toward the piano. She hadn't touched one in months. Life had gotten busy. Responsibilities piled up, and the joy she once found in music had slowly faded into the background. But even though she rarely played anymore, something inside her still responded whenever she heard the word piano. It reminded her of evenings spent in her grandmother's small living room, where old wooden shelves and warm lamps created a peaceful space. Her grandmother always asked her to play a little tune, even if she was tired. Those memories were gentle and meaningful, but they felt far away now. "Just something basic," Mr. Carver repeated kindly. "You'd be helping us more than you know." Isla took a slow breath. She wasn't confident, but she also didn't want the event to feel incomplete because of her hesitation. "I can try," she whispered. Those words were enough for him. Relief washed over his face. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "You don't have to start until the guests are settled. Just be near the piano when we begin." Isla nodded and watched him walk away to handle another task. She was left standing near the chairs, her mind suddenly full of thoughts she hadn't expected to face. She wondered if agreeing had been the right choice. Her palms were already slightly sweaty, and her heart felt unsteady. After finishing her setup duties, she walked slowly toward the piano. She didn't sit yet. She only placed her fingertips lightly on the edge of the lid. The piano felt smooth and cold. She stared at the keys, imagining the sound of them, remembering how music once flowed so easily from her hands. She reached forward and pressed one key, just a single note. It was soft, but it echoed gently through the large room. The sound made something inside her chest tighten in a strangely comforting way. It was like reconnecting with a part of herself she had almost forgotten. The hall continued to fill as the evening approached. People entered, greeting each other, taking their seats, and chatting excitedly. The atmosphere grew warm and lively, but Isla felt separate from it all. She sat on a chair near the side of the stage, waiting for the moment she would be called forward. Every few minutes she rubbed her hands together, trying to calm herself. She watched the guests, hoping they wouldn't pay too much attention when she started playing. She didn't want eyes on her. She just wanted to do the small task she was asked to do. Mr. Carver approached her again just before the event began. He smiled in an encouraging way. "Just relax," he said. "Play something simple. That's all we need." She nodded quietly. When it was time, Mr. Carver gave a short welcome speech on the stage, thanking everyone for coming. The crowd clapped politely, and after he stepped down, he gestured toward the piano. "We'll have a bit of music to start the evening," he announced. Isla stood slowly. Her legs felt slightly weak, but she forced herself to walk forward. People turned to look, some with mild curiosity. They didn't expect much from a volunteer walking up to the instrument. Many assumed she would tap out a basic melody, something plain, something small, nothing more. She sat down on the bench, adjusting her posture carefully. Her hands hovered over the keys, faintly shaking. She drew in a deep breath, remembering what she had been told. Keep it basic. Her first notes were simple, soft, and easy. A gentle tune, the kind anyone could play with enough practice. The sound traveled quietly through the hall, calming some of the last bits of chatter. But as she pressed each key, her heart began to unlock something she hadn't felt in a long time. The way the piano responded to her touch stirred old emotions and long-buried confidence. Her fingers remembered more than her mind expected. They remembered evenings of laughter with her grandmother, afternoons spent practicing a piece until it finally flowed right, and quiet moments when music had been her way of speaking to the world without using words. The longer she played, the more she felt the room fade away. The people, the lights, the tables, all of it disappeared in her mind. All that remained were the keys beneath her fingertips and the soft echo of each note rising around her. And though she didn't realize it yet, the melody was beginning to shift. Little by little, something deeper was forming. Something richer than the simple tune she had intended to play. Something no one in the hall expected. For a moment, Isla stayed with the simple, light notes she had planned. They were gentle and steady, just enough to keep the room comfortable. The crowd listened with polite interest, expecting the melody to stay soft and basic. But as the seconds passed, Isla felt a familiar warmth building inside her. Something she hadn't felt in years. It began in her fingertips, like a small spark that grew brighter every time she touched a key. The simple tune she started with felt too small for that feeling. Her hands wanted to move, to explore, to express things she didn't have words for. It wasn't something she forced. It rose naturally, quietly, like a memory slowly waking up. She had told herself to keep it basic. Everyone expected her to. But the piano responded so warmly to her touch that it felt wrong to hold back. She pressed a slightly richer chord, and its sound filled the hall more deeply than the notes before it. The shift was small, barely noticeable at first, but it carried a new emotional weight. Someone near the front paused mid-sentence. Another guest turned their head toward the stage. A couple by the refreshment table leaned slightly closer, noticing the change without fully understanding it. Isla didn't see any of this. Her eyes were half open, focused only on the keys. The music she played wasn't something she had prepared. It came from memory, instinct, and the quiet feelings she usually kept hidden. Every time her fingers moved, it felt like a part of her that had been silent was speaking again. She remembered sitting beside her grandmother on a small wooden bench. She remembered being guided by warm hands and hearing a soft voice saying, "Don't rush. Let the music breathe." She remembered the encouragement, the patience, the way those simple lessons had become moments she treasured without realizing it. That memory blended with the present, giving strength to her hands. The basic melody began to change shape, stretching into something fuller, smoother, more alive. She let a slight flourish slip from her fingers. The sound shimmered in the quiet room. More people turned to look now. They weren't expecting anything special, but the sound didn't match someone who played a little, as she had said. The music carried emotion, confidence, and a softness that pulled listeners in without warning. Mr. Carver, who had been speaking quietly with a guest, stopped mid-conversation. His head lifted, eyes narrowing with surprise. He took a few steps toward the stage, watching Isla closely. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had only asked her for something simple, to fill the silence. But this was different. Isla didn't notice him either. She didn't notice the hall growing quieter, or the way conversations faded so people could hear more clearly. She didn't know that phones were slowly being raised to record, or that some guests were whispering in shock. She was lost somewhere deep inside the music, a place she hadn't visited in so long it felt like discovering it again for the first time. Her fingers moved faster now but stayed graceful. She wasn't playing loudly or dramatically. There was no showmanship. It was pure feeling, pure memory. Each note she touched blended with the next so smoothly that it didn't sound like someone trying. It sounded like someone returning to something that had always been a part of them. She shifted into a lighter passage, letting the melody dance softly across the keys. It made the children in the crowd sit up a little straighter, as if the sound was telling a secret story only they could understand. A small girl near the front tugged her mother's sleeve and whispered, "She plays like the piano is alive." Her mother smiled, surprised and impressed, nodding without looking away from the stage. The melody rose slightly, then fell like a gentle sigh. It moved with emotion rather than technique, and that made it feel honest. People didn't need to know music to feel it. They felt the calm, the tenderness, the warmth. The hall, which had been filled with chatter minutes ago, now held a soft stillness. One man whispered to his friend, "Is she a professional?" His friend shook his head. "I don't think so. I've never seen her perform before." Another person added, "I thought she was just one of the volunteers." Even the volunteers stood quietly now. They had seen Isla helping in silence all morning, never imagining she carried something this beautiful inside her. Meanwhile, Isla's heart beat steadily. She wasn't thinking of the people watching. She wasn't thinking of anything at all. She was simply playing. Playing the way she used to before life got complicated, before her days were filled with work and responsibilities, before she convinced herself that music wasn't important. It felt like fresh air after a long time spent holding her breath. The piano responded to her with a warmth she recognized. She glided into a softer tone, letting the music drift like a quiet breeze. Her shoulders relaxed, the tension melting away with every note. It was the same feeling she used to get when she played late at night, when no one else was awake and the world felt peaceful. She remembered those nights well, sitting alone, letting her thoughts spill through her fingers. Back then, she played to comfort herself, to understand herself, to release things she didn't say out loud. She hadn't played like that in a long time. Today she hadn't planned to, but her fingers refused to stay basic. They wanted to speak. The music grew richer once more, rolling through the hall with a gentle power. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was full of emotion, full of memories, full of everything she never shared with anyone. People could feel it. A man near the back wiped a small tear from his eye, embarrassed but unable to help it. A woman clasped her hands near her chest, lost in the moment. A group of teenagers who had been joking earlier fell completely silent, their eyes fixed on her hands. A kind of wonder spread across the crowd, the kind that only comes when something unexpected touches the heart. Isla still didn't know what she was creating. She didn't know the effect she was having. All she knew was the keys beneath her fingers and the warmth growing inside her. She moved into a slightly deeper part of the melody, letting the notes fall like soft raindrops. Each sound echoed gently across the hall. The emotional pull of the tune grew slowly but steadily, building a connection between her and everyone listening. Mr. Carver finally understood something important. She wasn't just filling silence. She was transforming the entire atmosphere of the event. The hall no longer felt like a casual gathering. It felt intimate, meaningful. Something special was happening. Something he never expected when he asked for something basic. He didn't interrupt. He didn't dare. Isla shifted again, letting her melody drift into a warm, hopeful tone. It felt like sunrise after a long quiet night. The melody wrapped around the listeners, comforting them, lifting them gently. No one spoke. No one moved unnecessarily. They didn't want to miss a moment of what they were hearing. And still Isla played on. Her fingers danced softly, naturally, like they knew exactly where to go without her thinking about it. Her heart guided the music. Her memories shaped it. Each note seemed to carry a small story, even if no one knew what that story was. Finally, the music softened, easing into a gentle close. Her hands slowed, her fingers pressing lighter and lighter until the final note hung in the air like a faded breath. She held her hands above the keys for a few seconds, letting the last sound settle. The hall was completely silent, as if the room itself didn't want the moment to end. For the first time since she started playing, Isla looked up. She saw the crowd staring at her. She froze. Dozens of faces, all watching her with full attention. No one was chatting, no one was distracted, no one was uninterested. Every pair of eyes held something like surprise, respect, and something deeper. Something she couldn't name. She had been told to keep it basic, but her hands had refused. They had brought out something she had kept hidden for years. Something she didn't even know she could still do. Something that touched every person in the hall in a way she had never planned. And she had no idea what would happen next. For several long seconds, Isla sat frozen on the piano bench, her hands hovering awkwardly over the keys as the silence stretched around her. She hadn't expected anyone to stop talking, much less to watch her so closely. When she finally lifted her eyes, the sight of the crowd staring back at her made her heart jump. She blinked, unsure if she should smile or apologize or stand up and run back to the volunteer tables. Her breathing felt uneven, and she quickly lowered her gaze again, hoping the silence would break on its own. Didn't. People were still trying to process what they had just heard. The soft glow of the lights above the hall made the moment feel strangely warm, almost dreamy. No one moved at first. It wasn't because they were confused. It was because they were touched in a way they hadn't expected. A young boy near the front whispered, "Wow!" barely loud enough for anyone to hear. That single whisper broke the spell. Applause spread through the hall, soft at first, then growing louder and fuller. Some guests clapped with gentle admiration, others with excitement. A few of them even stood up slightly in their seats, moved by what they had just listened to. Isla stared at the ground, her cheeks warm. She felt overwhelmed, unsure if she deserved that reaction. She had only been trying to play something simple. She had only wanted to help. She hadn't meant to reveal anything personal, anything deep. She hadn't meant for anyone to truly hear her. But they had, and their reaction made her chest feel tight in a way she didn't understand. Mr. Carver hurried toward the stage, clapping as he walked. His face showed pure astonishment, the kind that comes when someone discovers something far beyond what they expected. He stepped behind her, waiting for a moment before speaking. "That was incredible," he said quietly, leaning a bit closer so only she could hear him. Isla shook her head, embarrassed. "I didn't mean to play so much," she whispered anxiously. My hands kept going." "That's a good thing," he said with a soft laugh. "A very good thing." But Isla didn't feel relieved yet. She felt exposed, as if she had shared something she wasn't prepared for. She could feel the weight of the crowd's eyes still on her, and she didn't know how to handle the attention. Mr. Carver gently placed a hand near the side of the piano. Not touching her, just leaning in to speak again. People loved it, he said. You made them feel something. Look at them. She didn't want to, but she slowly raised her eyes again. The applause had softened now into warm smiles, nods, and faces filled with appreciation. Some people looked pleasantly surprised, others deeply moved. A few guests near the front lifted their phones slightly to show her that they had recorded her performance. They gestured as if to say, "That was amazing." Isla swallowed hard and gave a small, shy nod. She didn't know what else to do. Before she could move, a woman in a soft gray shawl approached the stage. She had kind eyes and a warm expression, the sort of person who made others feel calm even before speaking. She waited politely until the clapping faded enough for her voice to carry. "Excuse me," she said gently, directing her words toward Isla. "I hope you don't mind, but where did you learn to play like that?" Isla's breath caught for a second. She wasn't used to being asked things like that. For a moment, she wasn't even sure how to answer. She looked down at her hands again before replying. "I learned when I was younger," she said softly, "from someone close to me." "That someone taught you well," the woman said with a gentle smile. "Your music has a lot of feeling." "Thank you," Isla murmured, unsure how to respond to praise like that. More people approached now, gathering near the edge of the stage. Not crowding, just watching with interest, wanting to say something but waiting for the right moment. Their expressions were warm, encouraging. It wasn't the harsh sort of attention she feared, it was kind, but it was still attention, and that alone made her nervous. A volunteer she knew approached from the side and whispered, "You never told us you could play like that." Isla looked down self-consciously. "I didn't think it mattered." "It does now," the volunteer said with a small laugh, "because you just stunned an entire room." A few of the guests nearby chuckled softly at that, and the comment helped the tension ease a little. Isla felt her shoulders relax, though her heart was still beating faster than normal. Behind the gathering guests, others were still talking in low voices. Some were saying they wished she'd play more. Others were discussing how surprising it was that such a quiet young woman had such a powerful touch on the keys. A few people passed around their phones, replaying short clips they had recorded, admiring the music all over again. Isla didn't know any of this, but she could still feel something shifting around her. The atmosphere of the hall had changed. Instead of casual chatter, there was a sense of excitement, curiosity, and warmth, and that warmth seemed to spread toward her. Mr. Carver, still amazed, cleared his throat and addressed the small crowd near the stage. "Everyone, let's give Isla another round of applause. She saved our evening more than she knows." The crowd responded with more applause, not loud or overwhelming, just warm and respectful. Isla stood from the bench, holding onto the side of the piano for balance. She felt almost shy enough to hide behind the instrument, but she stayed where she was, offering a small, grateful nod. Once the applause died down, she stepped to the side of the stage. She wanted to slip away quietly, but a few people gently stopped her, with smiles or simple questions. One guest said, "Your music felt like a story. Do you write your own pieces?" "I just play what I feel," Isla replied softly. Another person said, "Your touch on the piano is so gentle, but the emotion is strong. It's rare." Isla didn't know how to respond except with a small smile. Compliments always made her unsure of what to do. As she tried again to move away, a quiet voice from behind surprised her. That was truly special. She turned to see an older man with a thoughtful expression. He introduced himself only as someone who taught music at a nearby school. His gaze wasn't judging, it was respectful. "You have a natural connection with the instrument," he said. "It's rare to see someone play with that much feeling without trying to impress." Isla felt slightly embarrassed. "I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was just playing because I was asked to." "That's exactly why it was so powerful," he replied. "Music from the heart always reaches people." She lowered her eyes again, unsure how to take his words. She wasn't used to being looked at as someone who carried talent. She was used to being a helper, someone who organized chairs and set up tables quietly in the background. The idea that she could hold a room's attention with her music felt too big to understand. The teacher continued, "If you ever want to take your playing further, even just for yourself, I hope you do. You have something special." With that, he stepped back, giving her space. The crowd slowly began drifting away, returning to their seats or heading to the refreshment tables. The music she had played still lingered in the air, as if the walls were holding onto its warmth. Isla found herself finally able to breathe again. She stepped off the stage, but Mr. Carver walked beside her. "You did wonderfully," he said. "You don't know how much you helped." Isla nodded, still keeping her gaze low. "I'm glad it was okay," she whispered. "Okay?" he said with a small laugh. "It was more than okay. You surprised everyone, including me." She didn't know how to respond, so she simply smiled a little. As she walked toward a quiet corner of the hall, she passed by a group of people who were still discussing her performance. One woman said, "It felt like the music was speaking, like it held something meaningful." Another replied, "It wasn't about skill, it was about emotion. That's what made it beautiful." Isla didn't hear every word clearly, but she heard enough, and hearing it made something stir inside her. Not pride, but something gentler, something like hope. For the first time in a very long while, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, the part of her she had buried wasn't gone after all. Maybe it was waiting for a moment like this to return. She didn't know it yet, but the evening was about to take an even more unexpected turn. After her performance, Isla found a quiet corner near the refreshment table. She didn't sit. She just stood there, holding a small paper cup of water between her hands. She was trying to calm herself, trying to understand what had just happened. The room was buzzing again, but this time the energy felt different. It was warmer, softer, more connected, and somehow, she knew she had played a part in creating that feeling. Her hands were still trembling slightly, a mix of leftover nerves and something else she couldn't quite describe. Every time she replayed the music in her mind, she felt that same warmth rise in her chest, reminding her of the moment she let herself go and trusted the piano again. She took a slow sip of water and tried to breathe normally. But the quiet didn't last long. A small group of guests approached her politely, smiling with genuine kindness. One of them, a man with silver hair and a friendly expression, said, "I hope we're not disturbing you. We just wanted to say your performance was beautiful." Her cheeks warmed instantly. She offered a shy smile. "Thank you. I'm glad it was okay." The man laughed softly. "Not just okay. Touched people. You should have heard the whole table behind us. They were saying they've never felt a melody that gentle and emotional." Another woman beside him nodded. "It was like watching someone talk through the piano. You didn't just play notes, you spoke to the room." Isla didn't know how to respond, so she gave a small nod, letting the compliments settle in her heart quietly. The group didn't overwhelm her or stay too long. After a few more kind words, they stepped away, leaving her with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Being seen, not for what she could do behind the scenes, but for something she carried deep inside. She wasn't used to that feeling. It scared her and comforted her at the same time. As the event continued, the hall filled with laughter, conversation, and the soft clinking of glasses. People gathered around tables, exchanged stories, and talked about the charity they were supporting. It was a warm, community-driven evening, but every now and then, someone would glance toward the piano with a thoughtful expression. Some smiled when they looked at it, remembering the unexpected moment of magic they had witnessed earlier. Isla tried to blend back into her volunteer role, helping refill the water dispensers and rearrange a few chairs. But each time she worked, someone would stop her to comment on her playing. Nothing overwhelming, just simple words, soft gratitude, warm admiration. She never knew how to handle those moments. She would just nod gently or say, "Thank you," before quietly returning to her tasks. But there was one person she couldn't slip past. A man wearing a dark blue suit approached her slowly, holding a tablet. He looked like someone who worked often with music or media, There was a sharpness in his eyes, but not unfriendly, more curious and thoughtful. He stopped at a respectful distance and offered a small smile. "You're the young woman who played earlier, right?" Isla hesitated and nodded. "I hope you're not uncomfortable," he said. "I just wanted to ask, do you play professionally?" She shook her head immediately. "No, not at all. I'm not trained in anything advanced. I just learned when I was younger." "Well, that performance would make many people think otherwise," he replied. "Your playing had a natural emotional flow. That's something you can't easily teach." She looked down at her hands again, unsure what to say. She wasn't used to people analyzing her music. The man continued, "I recorded a short part of your performance to show my colleagues. I hope you don't mind. I didn't post it anywhere. It's just for private reference." Her breath caught for a moment. "Oh, I didn't know people were recording." "A few were," he said kindly. "And honestly, I understand why. What you played was not something people hear every day from someone who claims she's not a musician." She shrugged, feeling shy. "I just played what came to me." "That's exactly why it was powerful," he replied. Before the conversation went any deeper, someone called him from across the room. He lifted a hand in acknowledgement, then looked back at her. "If you ever decide to pursue music seriously, even just small performances, you could bring people joy. Think about it." Then he left, leaving Isla standing there with her thoughts spinning. Pursue music? Perform seriously? The idea felt huge, too big for someone like her. She shook her head a little, trying to dismiss it. She was just a volunteer. She helped at events, worked her shifts at a nearby shop, and played piano only in quiet moments when the world felt too heavy. She wasn't built for stages or audiences. She wasn't trained. She didn't belong in the world of musicians. At least, that's what she had told herself for years. The evening flowed on, and the hall grew fuller and more lively. People were smiling, sharing stories, donating generously, and connecting with each other. And in the middle of it all, Isla felt like she was floating between two worlds. Her usual quiet place in the background and this new, unexpected space where people saw her differently. She didn't know which space she belonged to now. Later in the evening, when the event had settled into a steady rhythm, a soft melody started playing from the sound system. It wasn't her playing, just background music chosen earlier. But the moment she heard the first note, her heart reacted. Not because of the song itself, but because she realized how different it felt from what she had played. Her music had come from somewhere personal, somewhere she didn't share often. Maybe that was why the crowd had reacted the way they did. Maybe they didn't just hear notes, they heard a part of her story. She walked away from the crowd for a moment and stepped outside the hall. The evening air was cool and refreshing. She let herself breathe, letting the quiet wrap around her. She leaned on the railing near the entrance, looking at the golden lights glowing softly through the hall's windows. The faint sound of chatter drifted through the walls. It was comforting, but her mind was far from calm. As she stood there, she thought about her younger self, the one who believed music was a place of safety. She remembered how confident she once felt at the piano, how natural it felt to express herself through it. But she also remembered the moment she stopped playing as much. Life had gotten busier. Time had become shorter. And slowly, she had convinced herself that the world didn't need her music. But tonight proved something she had never expected. People did need her music. Or maybe, people simply needed honesty. And her music had been honest. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the thought sink in. The door behind her opened quietly, and soft footsteps approached. She turned slightly and saw one of the younger volunteers standing there with a friendly smile. "I thought you might want a minute alone," the volunteer said. "But I also wanted to tell you, everyone is still talking about your playing." Isla smiled a little. "Is that a good thing?" "It's a wonderful thing." The volunteer reached into her pocket and held out a folded napkin. "Someone wanted me to give you this. They said they didn't want to crowd you, but they wanted you to have it." Isla took the napkin, surprised. She unfolded it slowly. Inside was a short note written in gentle, flowing handwriting. "Your music felt like a warm light in a quiet room. Thank you for sharing it with us. There was no name. Isla felt a small ache in her chest. Not a painful one, but a tender one. She folded the napkin carefully and held it close. "People really appreciated you tonight," the volunteer said. "I think you gave them something they didn't expect." Isla nodded slowly. "I didn't expect it either." The volunteer smiled, then went back inside. Isla stayed outside a little longer, feeling the cool air on her face and holding the folded napkin in her hand. She looked up at the sky, which was dark but sprinkled with faint stars. She wondered if life had just opened a small door she didn't recognize before. One she didn't know she could step through. She didn't know what the next part of the night would bring. But she was beginning to sense that something meaningful was ahead. Something unexpected. Something she wasn't ready for, and yet something she secretly needed. The moment the young woman stepped away from the piano, the hall felt strangely lighter, as if the air had been holding its breath the entire time she had been sitting there. People were still recovering from what they had witnessed. Some were whispering quietly, some were staring at the floor in disbelief, and some were smiling in a way that showed they knew they had just witnessed something incredibly rare. But the young woman herself didn't seem to notice any of that. She only felt relief. Relief that she had made it through the moment without her fingers shaking, without the fear taking over, without her mind going blank the way she had feared. She slowly moved toward the side of the stage, wanting nothing more than to blend back into the room. But that was the one thing she could not do now. She had changed the atmosphere of the hall completely, and the people who had dismissed her earlier could no longer pretend she didn't exist. The event host rushed toward her the moment she stepped down. He was still half smiling, trying to look composed, but the excitement in his eyes was too strong to hide. "That was unbelievable," he whispered, as if afraid to disturb the magic still lingering in the air. "You didn't just play a tune. You created something. I don't even know how to describe it." She didn't know what to say. She didn't expect praise, especially not like this. She looked down at her hands, still warm from the music, and shrugged slightly. "I just played what I felt." "You didn't just play," he insisted. "You changed the whole room. Everyone felt it." She wasn't used to people praising her like this. It didn't make her uncomfortable exactly, but it made her unsure of how to respond. All her life, music had been something she kept to herself, something she practiced quietly and privately. She played for comfort, for peace, for expression. She had never played to impress anyone. Maybe that was why the performance carried so much emotion. It came from a place inside her that was untouched by ego or expectation. Before she could respond, a small crowd began to gather around her. Their expressions were a mixture of awe and curiosity. A few people began asking where she had trained, who had taught her, how long she had been playing. She answered quietly, telling them the truth, that she had learned mostly from old books, online videos, and playing by ear. Her answer surprised almost everyone. "You mean you weren't trained by a professional?" one person asked. She shook her head. "No, I just learned slowly. I used to borrow a small keyboard from a cousin, sometimes even sit at old pianos people didn't use anymore. I've always loved it, so I just kept practicing." The simplicity of her answer made the crowd even more amazed. People looked at one another, whispering in disbelief. In a world where everything seemed to come with a price, training, opportunities, recognition, it felt unbelievable that someone with so little could create something so powerful. But not everyone in that room reacted with admiration. On the other side of the hall, near a tall speaker, the pianist who had earlier suggested that she keep it basic stood frozen in place. He couldn't hide the frustration in his eyes. It wasn't anger at her, exactly. It was confusion mixed with pride being bruised. He had been the highlight performer for the evening. He had been introduced as the most skilled, the most experienced, the one everyone expected to impress the crowd. But she had taken the spotlight completely without trying. He had played beautifully earlier, but now people were barely remembering his performance. It wasn't her fault, and deep down he knew that. It was just the way things sometimes went. A simple moment could overshadow years of practice if the emotion behind it was strong enough. Still, he couldn't bring himself to walk over and congratulate her. Not yet. Meanwhile, she stood there quietly, listening to the questions, answering with gentle honesty. She wasn't trying to shine or stand out. In fact, she hoped the crowd would settle down soon. Too many eyes on her made her nervous, even now. Eventually, she felt a soft tap on her arm. An older woman with silver hair pulled back neatly stepped forward. She was dressed simply but carried herself with quiet confidence. Her eyes were warm and thoughtful. "I've listened to many pianists in my life," the woman said. "And I want you to know something. You didn't just play notes. You told a story, a real story, and that is what people remember." The young woman felt a warmth rise in her chest. She thanked the lady softly. Compliments like that carried a different weight because they felt real, not exaggerated or forced. The woman continued, "If you ever decide to perform more seriously, I think people would want to hear you. You have something very rare." The young woman smiled politely, but she wasn't sure what to say. She hadn't planned for anything like that. She had come to the event just to help with small tasks, not to start a performance journey. Still, a tiny thought formed in her mind. Could there really be a place for her music in the world? Before she could think further, the event host cleared his throat loudly. "Everyone," he announced, "let's give her one more round of appreciation." That was truly unforgettable. The hall filled with claps once again. Even louder this time. She felt her face warm with embarrassment, but she also felt a rare feeling pride. Not the kind that makes someone boastful, but the kind that grows quietly when a person realizes they have done something meaningful. For a moment, she let herself enjoy it. The applause, the smiles, the warmth in the room. All of it was real, and she had created it with her own two hands. After the applause faded, the crowd slowly returned to mingling, but the energy of the room had completely changed. Conversations were livelier, smiles were brighter, and people seemed more connected than before. Her music had broken the silence in a way no speech or announcement could. She moved to a quieter corner of the hall to catch her breath. She felt like her heart had been racing for the past hour without pause. She leaned against a tall table and took a slow sip of water. Then, unexpectedly, someone approached. Someone she hadn't expected to see again that night. It was the pianist who had spoken down to her earlier. His expression wasn't prideful anymore. It wasn't cold either. If anything, it was uncertain. He stopped a few feet away from her. He paused. "I owe you an apology." She blinked in surprise. "I shouldn't have assumed how you'd play, or what you were capable of," he said. "That wasn't fair." His voice was genuinely humble now. Whatever frustration he had felt earlier was fading, replaced by something more honest. "I'm sorry," he repeated. She nodded gently. "It's okay." "No," he said quietly. "It's not. You were asked to play, and I treated you like you didn't belong. But you proved today that talent doesn't depend on where you come from." She didn't know how to respond, so she offered him a small smile. "You played beautifully," he added. "Really. You deserve the praise you're getting." Her smile softened. "Thank you." He stepped back, giving her space, but she could tell he meant every word. For the first time that evening, he seemed at peace with the situation. As the night continued, the young woman stayed mostly quiet, watching the event unfold around her. People still approached her now and then, asking small questions or complimenting her performance, but she took it all patiently. She was grateful, but she didn't let the attention get to her head. Inside her heart, something new had begun to grow. A small but bright sense of possibility. She didn't know exactly what the future would bring, but she knew one thing for certain. For the first time in her life, people had seen her. Not just noticed her, truly seen her. And that alone was enough to change everything. Long after the music had faded and the crowd had begun to drift toward the exit, the young woman stayed near the corner of the hall, watching as people gathered their coats, said their goodbyes, and stepped out into the cool night air. She felt calm now, far calmer than she had earlier. All the nervous energy that had filled her before she played had finally settled into something soft and steady inside her chest. But even with the calmness, she still couldn't believe how the night had turned out. She had come only to help. She had expected nothing more than to stand quietly on the side and make sure things ran smoothly. She had never imagined being asked to sit at the piano, and she certainly hadn't imagined that her playing would change the entire atmosphere of the evening. For a moment, she wondered if she would wake up the next morning and find the memory fading like a dream. But she knew it wouldn't. Too many people had witnessed it. Too many faces had changed the moment her hands touched the keys. Too many reactions had been real, too real to be imagined. The host walked toward her again, looking less rushed now that the event was almost over. He carried a warm and grateful smile as he approached. "You truly saved the night," he told her, shaking his head as if he still couldn't believe it. "I mean it. I had no idea you could play like that. I think even the guests will remember this night for a long time." She laughed softly. "I'm just glad it went well." "Well," he replied, "it went better than well." He paused and looked at her kindly. "You should consider sharing your talent more often. You really have a gift." She didn't know how to respond to that. For years she had kept her talent quiet, not because she didn't love music, but because she had never thought anyone would care to listen. She had always played behind closed doors, in small rooms, or on old keyboards where no one could hear her if she made a mistake. Felt safe that way. But tonight had shown her something she never expected, that maybe the world did want to hear her. "I'll think about it," she said softly. The host nodded, understanding that she needed time. Then he excused himself to thank a few remaining guests, leaving her alone again. The lights in the hall dimmed slowly, leaving a warm golden glow across the room. The piano still sat in the center of the stage, looking peaceful and untouched now. She stared at it for a long moment, thinking about how strange it was that a simple wooden instrument could hold so much emotion inside its keys. A gentle voice came from behind her. "You know," someone said, "that performance of yours, it reminded me why I started playing in the first place." She turned around and saw the pianist who had earlier apologized to her. This time he looked calmer, more open. Whatever pride or uncertainty he had felt before was gone, and he stood before her not as a competitor, but as another musician. "I haven't felt moved like that in a long time," he continued. "I usually focus too much on technique, on playing everything perfectly. But you played with honesty. It made me remember what music is supposed to feel like." The young woman didn't know what to say, but she appreciated his words deeply. "I'm glad it meant something to you," she said. "It did," he replied quietly. "It meant a lot." He hesitated, then added, "If you ever want someone to practice with or learn from or even perform with, I'd be happy to. I mean that." She smiled gently. "Thank you. That means a lot to me." He nodded, offering her a warm expression before stepping back to let her think in peace. One by one, the remaining people left the hall. Soon she found herself standing almost alone, except for a few workers who were gathering decorations and packing equipment into boxes. She offered to help, but they told her she had done more than enough. She stepped outside eventually, breathing in the cool night air. The stars were faint in the sky, scattered softly across the darkness. The world felt quiet in a comforting way, as if it knew she needed a moment to take everything in. As she walked down the steps of the building, she thought about her childhood, about all the days she'd spent near an old keyboard with missing keys, trying to copy songs she heard on the radio. She remembered sitting for hours trying to figure out how chords worked, how melodies blended, how to make her fingers do what she felt in her heart. She had learned slowly, quietly, without anyone pushing her or guiding her. Music had been her escape, her language, her comfort. And yet, for so long, she had believed her playing wasn't anything special. She had thought of it as something personal, something small. But tonight showed her something different. Her music had reached people. It had touched them. It had made them stop whatever they were doing and just listen. She never expected that. As she continued walking, she heard footsteps approaching from behind. She turned and saw the older woman with silver hair, the one who had spoken to her earlier with such kindness and warmth. "You're heading home?" the woman asked. "Yes," she replied. "Just taking a moment before I go." The older woman nodded and stepped beside her. "I wanted to say something before I left," she said. You have something very rare. Not just skill but heart. That kind of playing. It stays with people. The young woman lowered her eyes shyly. Thank you. I'm still surprised anyone felt that way. That's because you're humble, the woman said. But please don't mistake humility for smallness. You don't need to hide your light. The wind blew gently, brushing past them. I don't know what your life looks like, the older woman continued. But if there's even a small part of you that dreams of sharing your music, you should listen to that part. Trust it. That voice inside us, they call it instinct, inspiration, calling, whatever you name it, it's usually right. The young woman felt something stir quietly inside her. She didn't speak, but she knew she was listening with her whole heart. The woman gave her a gentle smile. Whatever path you choose, you have something special. Remember that. With that, she walked away, leaving the young woman standing under the streetlight, thinking deeply. She stayed there for a long moment, watching the shadows move across the ground. She didn't feel lost. Not anymore. She felt hopeful. Hopeful in a way she hadn't felt in years. When she finally began walking again, her steps felt lighter. She didn't know exactly what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid of the possibilities. She imagined sitting at a piano in a quiet room again. But this time, instead of hiding her music, she imagined sharing it. Maybe recording small pieces, maybe posting them online, maybe performing for small groups, she didn't know yet. But the idea no longer felt impossible. Felt real. She imagined people listening. Not hundreds, not thousands, not a crowd, but just someone somewhere who needed that feeling. Someone who needed a moment of calm or a moment of inspiration. If her music could give even one person that comfort, then maybe it was worth sharing. As she reached the street where the bus stop stood, she paused and looked up at the sky one more time. The stars seemed a little brighter now. She breathed deeply and whispered to herself, maybe this is the beginning, and somehow she knew it was. She climbed onto the bus when it arrived, choosing a seat near the window. As the city lights passed by outside, she leaned her head against the glass and closed her eyes, letting the events of the evening settle softly in her mind. People had seen her, truly seen her. Her music had spoken for her in a way words never could. And that simple truth stayed with her all the way home.